Good afternoon and welcome to the Social Services and Community Select Committee. Please take the opportunity to introduce yourselves, make some opening comments, and then we'll open to questions.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Today I'm here with our Executive Director, Sonia Marshall, who joined us 2 months ago at Manamokopuna Children and Young People's Commission. Kei te mihi ki ngā memo o tēnei komiti o te Paremata. Mō te rangai pāpore me ngā hapore. He hari hoa hau ki te tūtaki a koutou mō te kōrero o te tau o te mahi o Manamokopuna. Ko tēnei taku mihi ki ngā mokopuna o Aotearoa, whānau katoa o te motu, mō te mahi tahi i Manamokopuna i tēnei tau, ki te whakakaha, te mana o ngā mokopuna o te motu. Thank you to the members of the committee for the time this afternoon to discuss the work of Manamokopuna Children and Young People's Commission in this year under review. Up front, I've also thanked and acknowledged the mokopuna around the country who have been involved in our mahi over this past year. And I acknowledge and thank the whānau members, iwi and community members, the members of Hapu, as well as those working across the public sector in government who we have worked with this year, striving towards a collective vision. Kia kuru pounamu te rongo that all mokopuna live their best lives. I express my deep gratitude to my colleagues, Donna Matahaere Atariki, Dr. Julie Whareweremika, Ronelle Baker, and Josiah Tualama Ali'i, for their steadfast commitment to our work to centre the rights and voices of mokopuna at every step we take, and for their unwavering dedication to creating a future where all mokopuna can flourish. I sincerely thank all of our kaimahi for their work this past year to uphold the mana, the rights of mokopuna in everything they do across all of our work. This year in review, 2023-24, was a significant one for Manamokopuna. Our entity came into being on the 1st of July 2023 under our governing legislation. In October 2023, we farewelled the previous Chief Children's Commissioner, Judge Evers, and I mihi to her for her contributions as Children's Commissioner and then Chief Children's Commissioner. While the majority of our 1.2 million mokopuna in Aotearoa New Zealand are doing well, the reality is that a significant proportion are struggling with things like poverty, racism, discrimination, educational, health and housing inequities, poor mental health, discrimination and disadvantage, and being let down by the very systems that exist to serve them. This is the day-to-day reality for far too many of our children and young people. And it's these realities of life that our organisation has been doggedly shining a light on over this past year, advocating for positive change as their independent advocate. Manamokopuna has this year been focusing on delivering on our unique role relating to mokopuna and their rights as laid out in our annual report. This includes fulfilling our role as one of the 3 oversight of Oranga Tamariki system organisations, so that all mokopuna in our state care and youth justice system are experiencing all of their rights in all circumstances at all times. We are confident from the feedback that we have received, including from what mokopuna have told us, that we are having an impact and that more mokopuna know that they have an independent advocate, someone who is always in their corner, who exists for their rights. As one mokopuna who we have been privileged to work with this year has told us, and I quote, "Though young people make up only 20% of New Zealand's population, they are 100% of its future." Manamokopuna knows this. They don't just believe in us, they invest in us. They understand that our voices are essential in shaping the world to come. When someone truly sees your potential and stands by you with immense support, it gives you the strength to push forward, no matter the challenges. That's what Manamokopuna does. It lifts us up, reminds us of our value, and ensures we have a say in creating the future we deserve. Looking ahead, Manamokopuna remains wholly dedicated to ensuring that all the mokopuna of Aotearoa New Zealand have a strong, independent advocate working every day for their rights interests and their well-being. And as another mokopuna has told us this year, and I quote once more, listen to the voices of the young people and seriously consider what they are saying. We're becoming adults and we are the future. I look forward to our conversation today.
Thank you. I'll just ask an easy question to start with. Just curious, or could you explain why the name for the Children and Young Persons Commission is mana mokopuna?
Yes, absolutely.
Mokopuna being grandchildren rather than tamariki being children.
Absolutely, I would love to explain that. So whilst our official name under our legislation is Children and Young People's Commission, when the entity was in the process of being established last year, some work was done with the organisation to, I guess, look at the organisation's history. So we have a rich whakapapa of over 30 years of children's commissioners in Aotearoa New Zealand. So that's a really proud tradition. And the organisation wanted to honour that whakapapa and also bring through some of our work into our ingoa, our name. And so mana mokopuna had been a framework that had been created through some previous work of the Commission. And the reason why we use the term mana mokopuna is that it speaks of mana, rights, and mokopuna. And we use that term to speak of all children and young people in our country. And if we break down that kupu mokopuna into its two parts. So moko being the imprint, which sometimes will appear as the moko kawai, for example, or full face moko. And we know that children and young people are the imprint of their tipuna, their ancestors. And then puna being the word that speaks to a pull, and in this case, a reflection. So we see that taken together, moko puna speaks of the reflection, the imprint of ancestors of tipuna, and that is what all children and young people are. And so by utilising and drawing on that word mokopuna and putting it central in our work, we find that that word is all-encompassing of all mokopuna. And you're right, Mr. Chair, we are all, we have all been children at some point. We are someone's children. It also speaks to that intergenerationality of the reality of life for children and young people. And by using that word mokopuna, we believe that it draws us closer to the children and young people of Aotearoa New Zealand. And that's something that we aspire to for all people in our country, to feel a sense of closeness to the children and young people of our nation. Because as I like to share whenever I'm speaking in public about children and young people, they are taonga, people to be treasured, to be nurtured, and to be cherished. Mm-hmm. And so that is the whakapapa of the name of mana mokopuna, and we use that proudly.
Thank you for the explanation. Willa Jean, any questions?
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Can I first start by acknowledging the really important mahi that you all do. And I know on pages 10 and 11 of the annual report, it gives a summary of just the amount of visits that you've had, mokopuna and whānau that you've connected with, other impromptu visits that you've done, media releases, and I follow you on social media as well, so I can see how busy the rōpū is, and also how important your advocacy is. So I just wanted to start with that.
Yeah.
I want to go straight to the cuts that we have seen in the last financial year. That is both the cuts to staff within Oranga Tamariki, so-called back office cuts, and cuts to funding for community providers, specifically in the area of early intervention and prevention. Have you seen in your mahi any impact of those both staffing cuts at Oranga Tamariki and community services and contracts in the community? Have you seen any, are you seeing, hearing any impact of that on the front line and on Tamariki, mokopuna and their whānau?
Kia ora, tō pātai. There are a few points that I'd like to unpack to answer your question, so just bear with me while I unpack those points. because there are a few points there to consider, and this is an important kaupapa. And why I say it's an important one is because it does go to the heart of, the services and supports that we are providing here in Aotearoa New Zealand for children and young people, indeed for children and young people who are in some of our most disadvantaged situations, because we all know that that is the work of Oranga Tamariki, to support the children and young people who are in those situations of harm and trauma, to prevent those things from happening, because I think we can all agree we want this to be a country where no child experiences harm, where every child is safe in the care of their family and their whānau, and also that when they go, should they go into the care of the state, that they will always be safe and have all their rights upheld at all times and all circumstances. So if I first turn to the Oranga Tamariki contracting, so funding for community organisations and partners. The first thing that I want to mention in that regard is that, yes, we are hearing about significant impact of those reductions and cuts to contracts that were made earlier this year. And I understand that some of those organisations are still in the process of working through those discussions with Oranga Tamariki about their funding situation. When I say we are hearing about impacts, we are hearing about those impacts from community-based organisations that have been partnering with Oranga Tamariki to provide services and supports for children, for rangatahi, for whānau. We are hearing those concerns and those impacts from kaupapa Māori organisations, hapu and iwi social service organisations, and community-based organisations more widely. And what we are hearing is that those gaps that have opened up in some communities around those particular services and supports are causing concern for communities around the safety of children and young people. Some of the contracts that were reduced or cut by Oranga Tamariki were in that area of, I would say, prevention and early intervention. And there I'm talking about services such as Family Start, for example, youth one-stop shops, and also services that support whānau with things such as counselling in small rural places. And so those impacts are concerning. I'd like to just address why I raise concern about this issue in the first place, if I may, because why I worked together with my colleague at the Independent Children's Monitor, Aotearoa Tamariki, was in an effort to understand how these decisions had been made. Had they put children, young people and whānau at the centre of the decisions, to understand their needs and to consider what the impacts of reducing or taking away this funding would be. I wanted to understand what evidence had informed the decisions, and what the plan for transition for those young people and children and whānau from services was going to be in situations where services were going to stop or be reduced. Because sure, it is absolutely within a government's agency's purview to make those decisions, but it's really important that we ensure there is a transition plan in place so that no child or young person falls through any gaps. I also wanted to then understand the funding that has been reduced or cut. Where is that being reinvested, and how's that going to have impact for children and young people? That is an aspect that I'm still seeking clarity on from Oranga Tamariki, and I will continue to seek that clarity. I should say that there is obviously the currently underway Office of the Auditor General's inquiry into this kaupapa, and also I know that I will be getting a further briefing from Oranga Tamariki about its approach to funding and contracting into next year. Just briefly then on the other part of your question, which was about, if I understood it correctly, the impact of the Oranga Tamariki restructure. Yes, sure, absolutely. Sorry, forgive me. I'm recovering from a cold and this whole ear is blocked. And so I don't know quite how loudly I'm talking. So thank you.
You're not going to speak
Please
up.
just go
You're
loud.
whispering. Probably sounds like shouting too.
Okay, great. In terms of the Oranga Tamariki restructure, the first point I want to make there is that I don't think the distinction between back office or front office kaimahi is helpful in this regard, because we need to take a holistic look at what an agency like Oranga Tamariki that's focused on children and young people and their rights and well-being, we need to take a holistic view. And so yes, whilst a frontline social worker is doing the direct work with mokopuna and whānau every day, the so-called back office person who is, for example, putting together data to understand the impact of Oranga Tamariki's work, they also play a really crucial part of that, that organisation as well. So we do need, I think, that holistic view of what an agency like Oranga Tamariki has when it comes to the capability and capacity of its staff. I am still concerned, for example, about social work caseloads. I am still concerned about responses to reports of concern. And I am still concerned about the safety and the well-being of mokopuna in, for example, our youth justice and care and protection residences. However, I really want to emphasise here, since I came into this role, I have put a strong focus on advocating for Oranga Tamariki to get the basics right for mokopuna in its care and as an agency. And I'm really pleased in the briefings that I have had from the current acting chief executive. He has walked me through the plan of the strategic shifts and the reset that Oranga Tamariki's leadership team, Te Riu, is committed to making. And a big focus of that is on getting those basics right. So I'm pleased that my call to action there has been heard and that Oranga Tamariki is now focusing on lifting its performance around getting those basics right, because if it can get those basics right, that is going to be in the interests and supporting of the rights of mokopuna and therefore of their families and whānau who they are working with. It's really important.
Yes, supplementary to that. So in terms of the questions that you had, in terms of the cuts to contracts for services around early intervention and prevention, those questions that you had, like, is the child at the centre of this decision-making in children's best interests? Is there a overall strategy and so on, the things that you listed? Are you satisfied with the answers that you got, that your questions have been answered?
So again, my colleague Aaron at the Independent Children's Monitor, he utilised his power under the oversight of Oranga Tamariki Act to request information from Oranga Tamariki to answer those questions that we were interested in. Some of that information, quite a wealth of information did come forward to us, and that was important for us to understand from that system perspective. Just going directly to your two queries, am I confident that children were at the centre of those decisions? I still don't have that confidence that they were really at the very heart of those decisions, because when you see services such as Family Start, which Oranga Tamariki has an evaluation that shows it is making a positive impact to support at-risk tamariki in their first 2 years of life, when that is being reduced, then I still am not seeing the connection for how that is in the interests and the rights of children and young people. When it comes to youth one-stop shops, for example, when I talk with rangatahi around the motu, including those who are most disadvantaged, and I say to them, what are the services and the supports that you have found work for you? Youth one-stop shops are often very close, if not at the top of the list. So I'm still somewhat puzzled, to be honest, about how the rights and the well-being of children and young people were at the absolute centre of those decisions. And then secondly, the overall strategy. No, I haven't yet fully understood, to be honest, what the overall strategy that sat behind those funding decisions was. I now see Oranga Tamariki has recently published its strategic intentions for the next few years. And I see in that document and also the Te Reu plan that I've been talked through by the Chief Executive, that partnership with community partners and organisations still remains a core focus of those strategic intentions. And so I'd now really like to see Oranga Tamariki doing everything it can to rebuild that trust and that confidence with its community partners in communities and rohe throughout the motu, because that is what our mokopuna, our whānau, need to have that trust and confidence. We need to see that true commitment to partnership in an ongoing way. And I see that Oranga Tamariki has said that, over the next few years, that 50% of its resource will be transferred, if you like, or devolved into community organisations and hapuaniwi partnerships. That's positive, and I support that. But there needs to be a strong and clear plan that is co-designed with communities, putting the rights of mokopuna at the centre to inform how that work actually rolls out.
I have a supplementary. You mentioned before that getting the basics right is the most important. What are the basics?
Great question. First of all, safety. And so what I mean by that is for any child or young person in the care of Oranga Tamariki, be that in a care and protection residence, in a youth justice residence, in a foster care situation, or in a return remain home situation, safety needs to be at the absolute core of getting the basics right. And if I look at those most recent safety and care statistics, and this is important in light of the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse in State Care, 519 young people in the past year experienced abuse in our state care system, and actually a higher number of incidents of harm in state care, 894. So that means that some of those mokopuna experience harm in care more than once. That's unacceptable. So that's why I say, first and foremost, it's about getting the safety of children and young people right. And obviously that is one of their core fundamental rights under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Secondly, ensuring that the national care standards are fully implemented for every single young person, every single mokopuna in our state care system. Those are minimum basic standards for the rights and well-being of all mokopuna in the care of the state. So that's really important too. Third, listening to the voices of mokopuna in the state care system to understand what it is that they need, to hear them and take them seriously if they make complaints or raise concerns about their treatment or their care. And then also to co-design our system of care and protection and of youth justice with those children and young people who are recently out of care, who have that care experience, because it is them who know the solutions that they need. And what they are telling us more often than not is that let's go back to the very start and start with prevention. And so that's my fourth thing in terms of getting the basics right when it comes to Oranga Tamariki and across the Oranga Tamariki system. Let's really commit once and for all to a strong focus on prevention. And in my view, as the independent advocate for children, what that looks like in practice is strengthening families and whānau because every single family and whānau in this country has innate strengths. Sometimes our families and whānau just need a little bit more support wrapped alongside them, around them, so that those strengths can really come out to play, so that they can parent and care for children and young people in the most loving and safest and nourishing ways possible. And so a strong focus on prevention alongside ensuring that care experiences when children and young people are in our state care system. Those two things for me, they go hand in hand, and they will mean if we focus on those things, getting those basics right, over time, we are going to continue to see those numbers of mokopuna in our state care system come down. That is what we all want to see, and is what I advocate for us all to be committed to playing our part in.
Do I have a second supplementary?
Off to go to Kahorangi.
Do we only get one supplementary?
Well, we are waiting for a primary, some
But
primaries.
I've had one primary with one supplementary. Is that-
Kahorangi has been waiting.
That's right. Willow Jane can have my son.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Just had to do a line of questioning when it's just one primary and one sub. So on the basics, and you mentioned in there, one of the basics being prevention and how important that is to the overall objective of our children's system, which is to reduce the number of children needing to come into care. And then once they are in care, the other basics that you talked about. Does it concern you that we've had a $120 million cut to contracts for community services that provide early intervention and prevention, as well as in the youth justice space? So less of a focus on prevention. I've raised this with the minister. Her comments back are that the priority is children who are in care and protection, not prevention in the community, even though the legislation says that is the responsibility of oranga tamariki. So I am concerned that the minister is prioritising parts of the section when it's clear that they have a responsibility there, and then reducing the funding in this area as a specific example. So are you concerned by that level of funding being cut from prevention? And what are the risks with those cuts?
Yes, I am concerned about that for the reasons that I've just outlined. Prevention is so crucial here. If we look, for example, at Dame Karen Prutasi's report around weaving safety nets around children in light of the tragic death of a mokopuna, and we know that, just a quick sidebar here, we know that on current statistics, one child is dying every 7 weeks in our country from homicide. That is a reality that we must face up to. And so if I draw the direct connection, that is why a focus on prevention is so very, very important. I think it also goes to the heart of who we are as a nation when it comes to how we want to truly see our mokopuna, value them and respect them and uphold their rights. And so that is why I do advocate strongly for a focus on prevention, why I am concerned if we think about Dame Karen's analogy to a safety net, we want to be weaving that safety net stronger, not opening up holes in it. And so that's why I'm worried that that reduction in funding, I think, is what I'm hearing, is opening up some holes in those safety nets. And then I think taking it forward further, if we think about the downstream effects of not preventing or not leaning in as hard as I would like us to around prevention, I think that it will sadly mean that we are going to see more situations of harm to children and young people, which is the exact opposite direction that I think we've heard we want to go in as a nation, especially coming off the back of our recent national apology around the findings of whanaketia. I think as well that we will miss opportunities to really drive positive intergenerational change where we strengthen families and whānau for the benefit of our children and young people. Because the fact is, we can be a nation where every single child is safe in the care of their family and their whānau. We are a small, relatively rich country. And so we should really be taking every opportunity that we can to prevent harm from happening. Just in the youth justice space, we have seen, for example, in the Military Style Academy pilot, a commitment there from the government to putting therapeutic wraparound support in place for those rangatahi, in terms of, I'm talking here about things like mentoring, things like support for education and vocational training, and making sure that families and whānau of those rangatahi are supported at the same time. Those things, I think, are positive, and I will be looking closely at what the evaluation of that pilot shows. Those kinds of things, I advocate to the government to scale for all rangatahi, for example, in our youth justice system, so that they have that early intervention, positive prevention approach happening.
Ko Rangi, I'm conscious you haven't had a supplementary in your question, so I'll go to you before we move to the next one.
Oh, thank you so much. Are you saying
You go to your
primary? Okay, great. Cool. Thank you. Clarity is kindness. So the Child Poverty Act 2018 set a target to have child poverty by 27-20 to halve child poverty by 2027-28. However, I did see in your July 25th media release that the government appears to be, quote, lowering the ambition, end quote, with recent action plans failing to include initiatives that would significantly reduce child poverty. So how would you characterise the government's level of ambition and prioritisation regarding child poverty over the period, the last annual period of 23 to 24? I've got a supplementary as well.
I stand by those earlier comments, simply because I do believe that we need to have the absolute highest aspirations for all mokopuna in this country. Every mokopuna is born with that innate and boundless potential, and they should be able to flourish to experience that full potential. We know that the impact of poverty in the lives of mokopuna and in the lives of their whānau, in many instances, unfortunately, has a kick-on effect to them experiencing their wider rights. For example, their rights to housing, their rights to education, to positive physical and mental health. And so that is why I stand by those comments, because for some of those targets, we've seen them go in the wrong direction. And I think that unless there is really concerted action through strong investment and resourcing of families and whānau, lifting incomes and targeted policies to support the mokopuna who are overrepresented in our poverty statistics, I am concerned that we are going to see more children and young people going into poverty. I continue to advocate for the government to remain committed to that 2028 goal of halving child poverty in Aotearoa New Zealand. And that is also a commitment that we have made under the Sustainable Development Goals. One last thing to add, though, is that since I made those comments, I have called a number of times directly in my behind the scenes advocacy to ministers and the government and to government agencies, as well as in my public facing advocacy, for the government to commit to making ending child poverty an ongoing project of national significance. And I want to see commitment across this Parliament House to that ongoing project of national significance. One of the great strengths of the Child Poverty Reduction Act 2018 and the work that went into developing that act, which was really important work, is that parties from across the House work together on a cross-party basis to get that legislation across the line. And so I want to see the spirit of that cross-party working together on poverty affecting children and whānau continue. I do note that in the Child and Youth Strategy, which was recently refreshed and published and launched by the Minister for Social Development and Employment a few weeks back, that one of the 3 priorities in that strategy is reducing child material hardship. I welcome that. I am really pleased to see that. Our organisation was involved in providing a piece of work to inform that strategy refresh, grounded in the voices of mokopuna. And one of the key themes, we had 7 key themes come through from mokopuna, from what they told us. And one of the key themes that they told us they needed was having the basics in life. And there they were talking about things like those, basic essentials that every child should have, that for children in material hardship, they're missing out on 6 or more of those basic things like nutritious fruit and vegetables, 2 pairs of shoes, a raincoat, a separate bed. And so I'm really pleased to see in that child and youth strategy that clear commitment from the government to reducing child material hardship. Now I want to see clear policies, strong investment that actually is going to help to lift children out of poverty.
Thank you. And she's answered my supplementary.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Simon, any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm interested, have you been to visit the military style academy that has been, I think, recently?
Yes, so when the Military Style Academy pilot was established, the Minister for Children provided an open invitation to our 3 organisations that make up the oversight of Oranga Tamariki system. So Mana Mokopuna, the Office of the Ombudsman, and Aotearoa Tamariki Independent Children's Monitor, to visit at the Military Style Academy. We took up that invitation. It was important that we did that to be able to go and see the pilot in action for ourselves. I do want to mention that we were there for a relatively short period of time. We went for one afternoon. We were probably there for about 2.5 hours or so. And I want to emphasise that it wasn't a monitoring visit under our OPCAT National Preventative Mechanism mandate.
Okay, interesting. Supplementary on that, Mr. Chair. So what positive aspects did you see at the military style academy facility?
So first of all, I'll just talk you through what I saw during those 2.5 hours that I spent at the pilot. So we were at the residence in Palmerston North. We had a chance to meet and speak with the senior Oranga Tamariki staff who were overseeing that pilot, and also some of the team members, including, for example, the child psychologist who was working with the rangatahi. We got to hear about the different components that make up that pilot program, and to ask some questions around things that we wanted to learn about. We then got to go and walk around the facility, see the obstacle course and the field, and also see the some of the vocational spaces that the young people had been using, including their woodwork shed that in fact they had built themselves, and some woodwork creations that they'd actually created for a local early childhood education centre. We also got to see some of the other exercise equipment and the space that the rangatahi had been in. We then got to go into one of the units where the rangatahi were participating in a teamwork activity with exercise and just observe that. And then we got a chance to speak with the rangatahi themselves and to just hear a little bit about their experience so far. And one of the rangatahi took pride in showing us his bedroom and wanting us to see the space that he had been living in over the course of the time there.
Interesting. Just supplementary.
Supplementary.
Yeah, thank you. Would you be able to tell the committee how that might compare to other youth justice facilities visited, in terms of what was different?
The key thing that was different that I observed was, and we all know that quite a significant amount of resource and investment has gone into this military style academy program. And what I think in part that resourcing has enabled is a multidisciplinary team of specialist staff to be working at a higher ratio with those young people. That is positive. That is something that every young person in the youth justice context in Aotearoa New Zealand should have.
Supplementary, will
Thank you.
you?
Supplementary. Will you be tracking the in-community part of the pilot? So you've seen the in-residence part, but will you have any opportunity to see how the in-community part of this pilot is supposed to work? And further to that, are you concerned that the government is looking to pass legislation to sentence rangatahi to boot camps, which have not yet, the pilot has not yet been completed? I just note a article today in the Herald about the handcuffing of Napier children, which was deemed unjustified, and pushing one headfirst into the wall was excessive. This is use of force by a police officer. This legislation is talking about use of force.
Point of order.
So I think the primary question was around the military style academies, and you've introduced new material which is quite unrelated.
It's not.
It
sentences them to the military style academy.
So I guess my question to the chair is, if the question's primary is around military style academies,
It is, correct.
how close is describing an arrest in a city that's not the place where the military style academy is, how relevant is that, Mr. Chair?
If you let me finish asking my question before you interrupt, you would have
sorry,
heard how relevant
sorry,
it
I was just
was.
asking.
I would ask the member to make
That's
sure that
right.
it is relevant
It is.
to.
So in the legislation, which will sentence rangatahi to the military style academies, it is proposing the extension of the use of force to third-party providers. The example I was using is the inappropriate use of force by police who currently have these powers. Do you have concerns about the proposal to extend that to potentially third-party providers? So to recap, the questions are around, will you have any role in looking at what is happening at the in-community part of this? Are you concerned that legislation to sentence to it is being passed before the pilot has been completed? And what is contained within the proposed legislation from what you are seeing in these military style academies?
To address the first part of the partai, no, we don't have plans to track or monitor that in-community part of the pilot. However, we know that our colleagues at Aotearoa ki Tamariki Independent Children's Monitor, as part of their monitoring, I'm sure they are going to be continuing to take a close look, at how that part of the program goes. But I guess you'd have to ask them directly about their plans for that. However, what I will be maintaining a focus on is understanding the findings of the independent evaluation that I understand has been commissioned and is, I think, underway, definitely, in terms of that residential component. I've also advocated for there to be an evaluation that covers the entirety of the program as well. Turning to your second part of the question, yes, I have advocated for the government to just take a pause and understand what the findings of that evaluation are from the pilot. I think it's important whenever there is a pilot program, including in relation to a service or a support or a program for children and young people, that we seek to, because a pilot is something new, right? That we seek to understand and evaluate, to understand what was the impact on mokopuna. Is this something that promoted their rights, upheld their rights, that gave effect to those rights for those young people? And so I am really interested to understand the evaluation, but I continue to advocate that, yes, I would like to see government take a pause and just understand those findings. However, putting that to the side, that legislation has, as I understand now, been introduced, and I have made my concerns on a number of fronts clear to the Minister for Children, to Oranga Tamariki, and I have spoken about this in the public domain, that I do have concerns about what is proposed around, first of all, the aspect around third-party providers. I want to really understand deeply and carefully what is envisaged there with that term third-party providers. I wouldn't want to see private companies or organisations being commissioned to do this work, because we know if we look at the adult corrections system, that hasn't always worked. And we are talking about mokopuna here. And then secondly, the other reason why I do have a concern is around that extension of use of force powers outside of a residential setting. That is a pretty fundamental policy question that goes to the very heart of what I was talking about earlier, the safety and the well-being of mokopuna. And really, what I want to see us get to in this country is zero use of force on children when they are deprived of their liberty. The UN Committee on the Rights of the Child has been crystal clear on this as recently as last year in its concluding observations to New Zealand around the use of force and seclusion and restraints of children who are deprived of their liberty. This is something we should be actively seeking to avoid, and that can be done, for example, through proper, thorough, robust training around de-escalation techniques to keep children and young people safe, and indeed the people who are working with them safe in those settings. And so I will be advocating through that select committee process that use of force provision is removed from that bill before the House. Thank you.
I just a supplementary on that. How do you think it will be possible to restrain young people who are a threat of violence to themselves or to others if de-escalation techniques do not work? And there has to be something done to prevent them from hurting themselves or someone else. So I applaud your goal, but humans are complex things, and I've personally seen some of the complexities that can exhibit into very violent behaviour that has a big impact on other people.
This one is spitting.
I acknowledge that, in these settings, sometimes the rangatahi do have these really complex behaviours. However, I come back to the point, and I stand strong on the point, that it comes down to having the right staff with the right capability who invest time, energy and care in building good relationships with the rangatahi who are in their care in those youth justice settings. And it's through that combination of those strong relationships and that sound and robust training and capability in de-escalation, that we shouldn't actually get to a point where a group of rangatahi have gone out into the community on a camp or an excursion, for example, and we don't have those techniques at our disposal for those staff in those settings. So that is first, from a children's rights perspective, what I encourage some further work to be done to look at. And I think there are good examples that we can learn from, including in the iwi remand space, working with rangatahi, where there are already these positive programs for rangatahi that are happening in our communities, where there is not this use of force power available. And I would encourage us to really understand those, look at the evaluations of those, and build on those before we go down this path of making quite a fundamental policy departure from what has been in play for decades in this country.
Kia ora.
Supplementary coding.
Thank you. So we know that Māori children and young people are disproportionately represented in the youth justice system. So I'm interested in what, you've touched on it in your last answer there, but what is the potential impact of these military style boot camps, which from my understanding and from asking questions and talking to community and talking to providers, it is not clear that boot camps will look like the pilot that is currently being run. We are not transferring that pilot to be the boot camp. So just thinking about that, how could this approach exacerbate existing disparities within the system?
I guess my start point in answer to your question is to look at the hard data there. And if we look at the rangatahi who are in the military style academy pilot currently, as I understand it, I think it was 9 out of 10 whakapapa Māori. And looking more broadly across our youth justice and care and protection system, we know that mokopuna Māori are disproportionately affected. I think the key here is to work with whānau, hapu and iwi on the solutions that they are already developing and in many cases already have in place in their rohe for their mokopuna, for their whānau, and build on those strengths so that we can actually uphold the mana of all mokopuna Māori so that they can experience all of their rights. And I would just add that in the youth justice setting, all mokopuna Māori maintain their right to culture and to identity, which mokopuna have under Articles 8 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child and Article 30 on the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And from a children's rights perspective, those rights and the right to culture and identity are protective. And so that's why in our work in the OPCAT space, monitoring places where mokopuna are deprived of their liberty, we are always taking a close look as one of our monitoring domains. How are the specific rights of mokopuna Māori being upheld in those settings where they are deprived of their liberty? Where are the gaps? What are the things that need to be strengthened? And overwhelmingly, when our team speaks with mokopuna Māori in those facilities, they do hear from mokopuna that it has been positive when they have had opportunities to engage in their culture, to learn about their whakapapa, to build their understanding of tikanga me te reo Māori. And we see that where those gaps exist, it would really help mokopuna Māori to rehabilitate and address their own trauma if they have access to those adequate supports.
I'll go to Simon, what will have to be the last supplementary on this question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm
Oh,
really,
it should be Mary Minor.
I'm really interested, given the experience that you described in the military style academy, have you seen any improvements in other youth justice facilities in the past 12 months?
It's a great question. One thing that we have been putting a really strong focus on over this past year and the year under review, and we continue this, is a stronger way of holding Oranga Tamariki to account around implementing the recommendations and findings that we make under our OPCAT monitoring reports. And so, as the member might be aware, in those OPCAT monitoring reports, we always seek to outline very clear recommendations at both the facility level and the systemic level, with a view to strengthening practice, material conditions, preventing harm from occurring. And so now we have in place a strong process with Oranga Tamariki, where every time there is a report, an OPCAT report that comes through, there is a specific action plan that is developed in relation to each facility, and that also takes into account those systemic recommendations as well. And we can see that action plan, we can understand and track, where they are up to in terms of progress. One area of progress that I have been pleased to see is Oranga Tamariki really leaning into a stronger focus on building the capability of its staff, including, for example, its team leaders of the operations in those facilities. And pleasingly, Oranga Tamariki has invited me to be a part of those training programs for those team leader operations. In fact, I delivered a session just yesterday focusing on children's rights and advocacy and encouraging those team leader operations within those youth justice facilities to build a culture of protecting and upholding children's rights within our youth justice residences. So that's one positive thing that I am pleased to see. There's certainly areas that continue to need significant improvement, and it does go to the heart of that earlier point that I made around keeping all young people in our youth justice residences safe at all times, experiencing all of their rights.
We have 2 minutes left.
Right.
Sorry.
I'm going to
I know
ask a
everybody-
question about you. You've had 1 year, June to June or July to June, as the Children and Young People's Commission, Manamukpuna, and as part of the new oversight system. And now you're going to have that changed again. So rather than look forward, I want to start with just across the course of the last year. How do you feel that the oversight system has gone? Your performance in line with the monitoring, the monitor, in line with the Ombudsman dealing with complaints? Do you think that the overall system has achieved what it set out to do, particularly in light of some of the early criticism and concerns around the changes?
My view is that this oversight system is working well, and that has, I think, been down to the strength of commitment from all three organisations that make up the oversight system to make the system work well. And we do that with a unapologetic and upfront focus on mokopuna at the absolute centre of that oversight system. That serves us well. It means that we are taking a no wrong door approach and working really closely with one another based on the strength of those relationships. We've also taken a proactive approach to communications around what the oversight system is, because we do know that there was some confusion initially. Some of that confusion is still residual in part, and I think that's understandable with quite a significant change and only being about just over a year into the change. However,
Just on that though, is there going to be further confusion now that we've got further legislation going through to change the system again?
I would hope not, because we are absolutely clear about what the oversight system is, that we are here for all mokopuna and whānau in that oranga tamariki system. And we are very clear, if I speak for ourselves as mana mokopuna, about what our role in that system is. And that is to be that strong, independent advocate who is loud and proud about the rights and the well-being of mokopuna in our state care.
Just
We-
one up on that,
we-
because the big change for you coming up, on reflection, you've had four commissioners, board commissioners? Is it 5?
Of 5 including myself.
Yeah, including yourself. So that will be the shift. How effective has it been having other commissioners around the table who have the breadth of experience that those ones came with?
Well, let me first acknowledge, as I did at the start of this conversation, my fellow board members for the mahi that they have done to date to establish mana mokopuna over this past year, because their professionalism has reflected the mana that they hold as individuals. We have made the model work. You can see that reflected in our work and how mokopuna themselves and others in the community speak of our work, the relationships that we hold, including across government. I think the core thing here from my perspective is that the model worked before, we've made it work now. Whatever comes ahead, if the bill should pass, we will make it work so that the mokopuna of this country continue to have that strong, independent advocate that exists for their rights, for their voices, for their well-being.
We are over time, but we will, no doubt, there's a lot of questions I think we'd like to send through. We'll send those through, those questions.
Ka pai.
So thank you for your time this afternoon.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you.
Thank you.